Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi, and today I have a team report from the World Championships, and I am joined by my good friend, 45 Mice. Justin, how are you doing?
Hello. I'm doing great. How are you doing, Nadi?
I'm doing great. Just got back from Hawaii, and yeah, really excited to dive into all of these super cool teams that came out of this tournament. Starting with yours that you used to get top 16 at the World Championships with Dondozo, Calyrex, Shadow, Weezing, one of the crazier teams that we saw this weekend. But yeah, I guess before we jump into your team, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm 45 Mice. I go by 45 Mice online or Justin Knox. I'm a VGC player. I started playing some around Sword and Shield, but I took it more seriously around Scarlet Violet. I'm also a medical provider, so I'm usually pretty busy and don't go to a lot of tournaments. Kind of barely qualified for Worlds this year. I think I was like at like 570 or something like that, and not in the top 75 for NA, which I thought was funny. But yeah, so I was really excited to go to Worlds. This is my first Worlds this year. Um, Other than past accomplishments, I had top 8 NAIC and top 8 Peoria. Other than that, like a few like top 32. So this was definitely a really big accomplishment for me, and I'm pretty happy with, and pretty happy with how I went.
Yeah, it was awesome to see, and like I said, I think he is one of the more creative teams in the tournament. So yeah, this is not something that we've seen anything like before the World Championships. This was not like around at NASC as far as I know. So how did you come up with this team? And yeah, talk me through your team building process and your preparation process.
Yeah, sure. So for me, when I go to events, I really try to build or really kind of make kind of some wacky stuff for it. My general theory of how I do events is that if you bring something that is similar to a lot of like what's meta, whoever you're facing with, they're going to have a lot more experience playing that matchup. And if they bring something weird, it might be your first time playing it. You're going to play worse. So my general theory of these events is that the teams that innovate, or teams that bring some kind of off meta stuff, tend to do really well. So that's kind of my theory going into it. So I was really determined to try and build something, a little off meta. I first started, I was really convinced, like if it was like a month ago, I was going to bring Koraidon. I had like Koraidon, Venu, and Scarchi U that was really good into Calyrex balance, but it just got destroyed by Mira, so I ended up dropping it. So I started exploring around, and what kind of piqued my interest first in Calyrex Weezing was that Japanese like ladder team. It was like Mousehold, Weezing, Calyx that was specs, and it was like offensive dozo too. If you look into like my Discord like 3 weeks ago, I was like interested in team, but I was like adamant I'm not using dozo. I thought dozo was trash, and it's very funny screenshots now. But I that was just kind of my starting point. It's like, all right, I'll just start with this, just because the team seems kind of cool, and kind of work from there, just to see if Calyrex Weezing is viable. And I found that I really liked the Weezing Calyrex. I hated Specs Cali. It felt way too easy for people to play around, just because they can like double protect in front of you. They can do all kinds of stuff just to kind of make it you're forced into a linear line, and I really didn't like that. So I immediately dropped Specs Cali. Life Orb felt very offensive, but also being able to switch moves felt really important. So Specs was completely out for me. I love Weezing. It was one of my first teams that I ever made back in Sword and Shield in like Series 6. I was using Weezing Terrakion, which was a lot of fun. So I've always kind of had a soft spot for Weezing. I hated it earlier in the formats, like I think it's like Series D or E, um, where it was like with Roaring Moon, where it just felt like it just kind of sat there. So I was really trying to interested in making a more Weezing that was more proactive and was something that opponents actually had to pay attention to, instead of just kind of ignore while it just kind of maybe got a wisp off and then died. This Weezing, I liked the idea, which came from the Japanese team, which it made it more proactive, is like toxic spikes and poison gas, which is really annoying with Dozo. The main idea behind that team, which is that you set up poisons, you kind of chip them a little bit. You get in Dozo, then maybe you kind of finish off with like Calyrex if you preserve it well, or the poisons kind of end up chipping them. Um, and what that team I think didn't get quite as right as one, it was super weak into Amoonguss. It had zero Amoonguss resist. And my big and I like I view Amoonguss as kind of the big skill check. Like if your team can play around Amoonguss, then it's a good team. And for that, you need at least two resist. I like preferably three, but that's kind of like a hard rule I have, is that you have to at least have three like two resist. And that team had zero. Without Terra, you could grass Terra, but that just feels like it just feels so bad just to use your only Terra just to not lose to Amoonguss. Um, so I fix come in with a core of like Weezing, Calyrex, and then Dondozo. I tried the offensive variant and I found it much worse. And the reason why is that Dondozo is still like, if it was like the offensive variant, if you can like make it have some speed and like outspeed Urshifu, or you can make it bulky, but you can't make it both. So it felt like you were sacrificing one, and that you either had a Dozo that would maybe get like a KO and then die, or you would have a Dondozo that would be just really slow and have some bulk, but it would just get outsped by everything, and you would still only get off like one or two moves before you would die. It didn't feel very impactful. So I had played around with the defensive Dozo in the past. I never like anything seriously. It was like rest talk, so I was kind of familiar with it, and I had the idea all of a sudden. It's like, wait, if I'm poison stalling, why wouldn't I choose the more defensive option just to kind of really throw a wrench at people's plans? And the idea was that this Dondozo is extremely bulky. It lives obscene things. It takes 3 wood hammers. It's during bracket it lived 2 glacial lances, one of them crits, and 2 wood hammers. The goal is just to make it as bulky as possible. I gave it the speed to outspeed Adamant or Shifu when it has Tatsugiri, which felt pretty important actually. Otherwise, just make the rest in bulk. And the reason behind that is that Body Press Dondozo actually counters a lot of the meta. It does super well versus Terrapagos. You especially Calm Mind Terrapagos. Uh, Weezing turns off its shell. You can poison chip it. Body Press. If you just don't get any order up boosts, you actually do like 65% to it with Body Press, which is actually a really good chunk. Just like one order up boost, you actually one shot a good amount of Terrapagos. You're really good in Zamazenta. You're really good into Calyrex Ice that doesn't have clear smog. We're going to get to that later. um, and you're really good into basically like their Shifu, Rillaboom, instant cores that are super common. So that's what really kind of, once I switched from offensive Dozo to defensive Dozo, within 3 sets, I was telling friends like, this is it. Like, this is amazing. Just because it does so well versus a good chunk of the meta. And then the rest was just kind of figuring out the last two to kind of fill out the holes of it. Like this 4 is really bad into Scarf Chiyu. So Scarf Chiyu is a major problem, as well as Amoonguss. I still wanted some more additional help to Amoonguss. I had been using Inditi with my Koraidon team, so it felt like perfect just to kind of slap it with Calyrex. So then you have some alternative modes. Inditi Calyrex had just won the victory row before this too, so something that I was very well aware of that could do really well. So that just felt something like slapping on a DD with goggles. Feel like you help versus Amoonguss. You give yourself an expanding force mode, which plays really well with Weezing because you can really control terrain pretty well, and then you can keep Calyrex safe with priority and all kinds of different stuff. Um, yeah, you can reverse Trick Room, and you're generally fairly bulky. You can be Terra Water, keep you safe from Urshifu, and then also like take Glacial Lance and reverse Trick Room, stuff like that. I was testing Dark Urshifu. I had like thought of Water Urshifu, and I immediately like crossed it out because it's triple water. Like you don't realize it until you think about it. It's like it's triple water. I was convinced I was going to get destroyed by Bolt or Miradon. And then my good friends Carl Shots or Carl, he mentioned he's like, dude, you should just carve Scars Urshifu, like maybe like triple fairy won worlds in like 2017. Is like, oh, okay, so maybe triple types can maybe work. That's kind of the convincing thing for me. And I made a Jolly to really counter the like most GUs are like that are Scarf or Modest to be a little greedy on damage. So I made my Jolly pretty fast. The idea with Rock Tomb was to like get other Scarf Urshifus. So if they led like Scarf Urshifu and something else, and I led my own, I could Rock Tomb their Urshifu and KO it with Astral Barrage or Expanding Force. So that was the main idea with the faster Urshifu. And I also like with the Dondozo, I wanted a mode that you could do outside of just Dondozo and not just have, just a bunch of other support Pokemon. And the 4 of actually Weezing, Calyrex, and DD Urshifu is actually very solid. You can turn off abilities, so Urshifu or Calyrex can snipe things. You control terrain, and you have a lot of support for those. So a lot of times when people would over focus on the Dozo mode, I would switch it up immediately and then go to those 4, catch them off guard, trying to get greedy for like a fake out or something like that, and then be able to really counter that well. So once I tried Scarf Shifu, I was immediately like, this is the 6. I felt very confident in it. At one point, I had 2 counts in top 25 in SD, and like another in like top 100, which is, I mean, I'm usually pretty high on ladder, but that was still really good for me. So I felt very confident in it. And even like just in prep, I just it was doing really well versus practice sets and teams, even though everyone was like raging me like no Dondozo is bad. I was like, I swear it's good. Sash Valley, the best item for Tatsugiri. Helping Hand actually came up a lot. When Dondozo dies and you still got Calyrex, it's really useful to be able to Helping Hand right next to it. So that was another good addition by Carl. But yeah, that's kind of the six in a nutshell. The idea is basically to chip some things down with Calyrex or Weezing, get poison things up, and then go into Dondozo, get an order up or two, and just stall out, let poison really chip them up and take a few key KOs. And then kind of ultimately end game it with like Calyrex and Tatsugiri or something like that, which ends up working quite well versus a large chunk of the meta.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great overview of how you put the team together. And you know, it's funny because you said it, you picked it because it was kind of like an unorthodox pick, and it was, it seemed like, but like it was all over the ladder going into the tournament. And I feel
Yeah.
like everyone had probably played against it. I think there were four sort of variants of this team in day two of Worlds, and of course you went the furthest. And so yeah, I think that it kind of goes to show you that not only you weren't just catching people off guard. I think everyone was kind of aware of the team. It's just like, yeah, it is a really strong team, and I think you really optimized it really well.
Yeah, I think the Urshifu is pretty key because I had tested without it, and Scarf Chiyu is just a major problem. And a lot of Calyrexes were running, like AV Chiyu had also done pretty well. And like, I don't know how you're beating AV Chiyu with support um, pretty well. So it definitely felt the Scarf Urshifu and even the Ndidi felt pretty key as just like alternative modes to really support Calyrex and catch people off guard with adjustments. So I definitely agree that I think this was the best, the variant to come out of them.
Hmm. Yeah, and so talk me through the individual Pokemon and why you chose to run the sets that you did.
So Weezing Mental Herb, that actually came up a few times in testing. If opponents had like fast Flutter with taunt or like Urshifu Bulky with taunt Mystic, it was really problematic. And it was originally Cloak, which was useful, but then I had Indeedee, but you know Indeedee doesn't really proc terrain when Weezing's out. So I was kind of between Mental Herb, but it just Mental Herb feels like it switched more matchups to favorable than what Cloak did. Whereas Cloak maybe just helped with this like Pago's balance or something like that. Otherwise, those kind of meh. Metal Herb really helps those like matchups where they rely on taunt. Weezing just shuts down the abilities. It's really good into like Zam. For some reason, Calyrex is the only Pokemon that doesn't get its ability turns off by Weezing. So it's like the best partner for it. Um, it turns off like Qian Pao, like sort of Ruin, which is really useful. It can even stop opposing Dondozo. I had actually tried the mirror, and the mirror was extremely favorable for me. Basically because I wouldn't bring my own Dondozo, I would just go Weezing, Calyrex, or Shifu, and Indeedee, and I would be able to stop their own Dondozo because they had to bring it. So I'd seen a few of the variants and it felt quite good in them. But anyway, um, Grass Terra, mainly just to like resist Urshifu and like Raging Bolt stuff. Toxic Spikes, just basically like if they let you be around too many turns, you can start setting Toxic Spikes. Getting one layer is good. Getting two layers is really good. I actually won one of my sets versus Dorian with that because game three I was able to get up two layers of Toxic Spikes versus Calm Mind Lunala with lefties, and it wasn't able to get a setup in time. So if you just give it too many turns, it can just really pose a giant end game problem for you. Calyrex, probably still one of the best restricteds. I know it didn't win, but I still think it's quite strong. Terra Normal, just because the mirror, if you're Terra Normal and expanding, you're usually pretty favorable into it. I didn't feel like I had enough turns to really click Nasty Plot and it be effective. So I decided on the third coverage move. I was really happy with Pollen Puff. You could hit like Terra Grasses, you could hit Rillaboom for like 60%. You can hit Farigiraf, which was a big thing. It does like 88% to Farigiraf, and you can like KO it with Weezing Gleam. Um, so the Palm Puff actually felt quite good. Also for like Terra Dark Calias, you have now a way to hit them where otherwise you wouldn't. Versus like if you ran like Dark Pulse or Terra Blast or something. I did try running Terra Blast Water, but it didn't feel quite as good because you had two moves until you tear it, and then it still just didn't feel like the move really. And Davy was probably the least brought, but it was quite good when it was. Good for like the mirror. It's good for like switch ups when they're really expecting to dozo. Um, like this happened in my set versus MBD, Michael Brester. I'm sure I pronounced that incorrectly. But I got into Dozen mode the first 2 sets, and then the last one, I swapped it up, and I led, like, Calyrex and Urshifu. I swapped it in DD, predicting that they were gonna go for priority, and I just KO'd his Chien-Pao. So it just really creates this, like, these modes that they have to constantly respect, and they don't, it makes it really difficult to play against. Dondozo, has just great coverage, like water, dragon, and fighting is just great coverage in this meta. There's not a lot that really walls it. After a body press or two, after I once I was versus Calyrex Ice on ladder and I gotten like 2 order ups and I was Terran and I took like 20% from Calyrex Ice, I was sold. It was just like you just have to not get crit in Trick Room, and it's very solid of just like doing like 2 order ups, a body press before Trick Room ends, and then you double tap it with body press after Trick Room ends. And I felt very reliable versus Calyrex Ice as long as you like didn't get crit for those like 1 to 2 turns, but still like in general you should win that. So it felt very consistent. Um, and body press does a very respectable damage. The combo of order up and body press KOs Urshifu, which was very cool. Um, it also like order up even with like no investment does like 60% to Raging Bolt, and the or combo of like order up into body press KOs a lot of things like Raging Bolt, um, Urshifu. Rillaboom also gets KO'd by order up into body press. Body press just at 2x does like 50% to like everything. You need 1 order up to KO like instant, but it felt like a really good version of it because you didn't care about intimidate, just because you can intimidate, but my real damage is through body press. So I have a really hard time stopping that. Um, Katsuguri Stellar was just actually useful just at the end game. Sometimes you didn't have to Terra, and you could just Draco Meteor stuff or Muddy Water, and that actually won me a few games. Sash felt like the best item for it. Like Scarf, you still don't outspeed Calyrex, so I didn't really feel that high value. Urshifu was very good versus Pagos and some Calyrex Smears, just because it outspeeds things. It's a really good adjustment. I had a bulkier Urshifu initially. Really played around the EVs a lot. I didn't find much that I was like meaningfully willing to live, and it's Jolly, so it doesn't hit that hard regardless. So we basically just made it outspeed Annihilate, Scarf Annihilate, and then max attack, rest in HP, and just kind of bounce it from there. Yeah, Rock Tomb was mainly just to try and like catch people off guard, getting their Scarf or Shifu or their Scarf Ape, and then getting the KO with Calyrex. But yeah, and Terra Water, of course, just because it just does more damage that way. So some general EV things. Weezing lives a non-electric Terra Miraidon Electro Drift with specs. It takes I think it takes a surging and like a wood hammer. The main thing was that I wanted to just maximize EVs with bold and just put the rest in special defense. And then we had kind of 12 EVs left over that we just kind of put in speed just to maybe outspeed some mid speed Grim Snarls or Ensign. Calyrex is maximized for special attack. It actually for defense actually makes you have better rolls versus Scarf or Shifu, so that was actually very relevant. Indeedee had 44 special defense. Just to it actually lives a blood moon, a non-Terra normal blood moon. Was that actually came up at Worlds, so that was actually a cool thing to have. Otherwise, Psyshock just does general damage to like Amoonguss, helping handfall me, kind of standard stuff. Just gives you another Amoonguss resist too. Um, yeah, the Dondozo is like my pride and joy is the one. Like I'm not the best at EV spreads. I usually have to have friends help me, and that was like the first EV spread that I made. That was like amazing. So I'm proud of that one. It leaves 3 Terra Dark Wicked Blows. It takes 3 Wood Hammers. It does if you do it in 1 order up. Glacial Lance does like 25%. It's with like Terra. It just takes nothing from everything. Astral Barrage does like 20%. It's just so incredibly bulky that if you just let it get like 1 order up, it's really hard to take down unless you crit it, or you just slowly chip it down. Yeah, those kind of the main EVs
Yeah,
optimizations.
Those Dondozo calcs are pretty crazy, and
They're
yeah,
crazy.
especially in a metagame where a lot of the damage from teams is centralized in 1 or 2 Pokemon. Having a mon that is just basically a physical wall where it's so hard to break through is actually really strong. I know I play this a few times on ladder, and as a Calyrex Ice player, I mean it is so unbelievably difficult because to break through this set especially because so much of my damage is coming from physical attackers, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, having all that physical bulk really changes the way Dondozo plays, and yeah, it's pretty nuts. And I guess on that note, let's talk about how you actually played the team. You mentioned a few different game plans, but did you have like sort of set game plans going into Worlds with how you were going to play against certain archetypes, or was it a little more fluid?
I had practiced most matchups a pretty good amount. I knew the general game plans, but you never know based on what they have. General game plans versus like Cali S. Um, yeah, you would sometimes go to Dozo depending on what they have. If they had like Chi-Yu, then Dozo was often kind of good, especially if they were like bulky Chi-Yu, then you could like KO it before Chi-Yu did anything. So like versus Calyrex, almost all 6 Pokemon are bringable. Like you can go to Dozo, and if they try to overcompensate for that, you can surprise them and bring like Urshifu and Weezing. But Weezing's not amazing versus like Calyrex Shadow that has Psychic, so then you usually can't get off like your poison stuff, and you have to rely on other modes. The Calyrex Shadow Mirror is kind of the most volatile. It's kind of speed ties and just reads. Um, it's hard to make wholly consistent across all spectrums. But if they, I faced it like twice, and it's pretty much just like Calyrex and DD, and then if they're Terra normal, then hope you get the 50-50 right. If they're Terra like Dark, it's a little bit easier because like Helping Hand Puff KOs. But yeah, in general, it felt pretty good into Cali Shadow, if not a little volatile. Miradon was actually extremely favorable. I was initially surprised. I did not think Dondozo would be bringable into Miradon at all until Carl had tried it out one time. And the lead of like Weezing, Cali S just to chip things up with the Dondozo cleaning and just stalling is actually quite strong. Because if you get any chip on Dondozo, it dies in like 2 poison turns and then they can't do anything. And they don't want to lock into a Terra like grass like move because then they and they don't do anything to Terra when you Terra Grass. They also, if they Draco Meteor and they kill Dodozo, all of a sudden, if they have like 2 Pokemon left, then they're like minus like 4, and then it's not very helpful. Then um, Miradon was actually very favorable for the like you had multiple leads to go into it. Like you could lead Cali, S, and Indeedee, and if they led Miradon, they're like screwed. Like if they don't have Grimdon, Grimmsnarl, or they don't have like any dark types, you can like Helping Hand Astral, you can Expanding Force, you have like all the tools available to you, and it's a really hard matchup, like series team in finals. That was one of my best matchups that I had wanted to face quite a bit. Screens Miradon is also quite favorable too. You just turn off their abilities, and they really lack the damage to kind of break through Weezing in time. You just like poison, Grimmsnarl, you set up spikes, you bring you bring in Dondozo, and they have a really hard time breaking through before the kind of poison gets to them. I faced Miradon screens, I think 2 to 3 times in my run, and I don't think I dropped a game. If that matchup was quite strong. Zamazenta was also one of my best matchups. I beat Michael, who ended up getting fourth or third or fourth at Worlds. I beat him day 2, and he even said afterwards that he thought the matchup was pretty terrible for him. It basically just because he has a really hard time getting through to Dozo. It takes several turns. If I get up any poison, it's troublesome, but usually like it's kind of just trying to chip things, letting Dondozo get in. And they have to respect Dondozo at all times. And if they don't, like kind of I talked about earlier, I could do the switch up and don't bring Dozo and bring more NDD and just control terrain and poison stuff. And that can also just be very problematic for them. So it felt very strong into Zamazenta. Kelly I was good as long as they didn't have Clear Smog. Both of my losses were to Clear Smog Kelly I. It's the worst matchup. If that became popular, it would have to have some adjustments. Um, but it is playable because I did beat was his name Yuta, who got second. Yeah, I did beat him the first time I played him. I don't know how. I just had to play really aggressively. But yeah, it is possible to beat it. It's just really hard. Um, yeah, that's probably the worst matchup that I did not expect to see. I was just like, who's going to run Clear Smog? Is Dozer like that big of a threat that people are going to run Clear Smog? It turns out, yes. The answer is yes. So that was the worst matchup by far. Terrapagos felt pretty good unless it was like Amoonguss kind of balancy stuff. Then that could get kind of tricky. But I had a really good set versus Sabis. You don't even bring Calyrex, and you just go like Urshifu, um, Weezing, poison stuff, and then Dozo sweeps. The Dozo just feels like basically another restricted almost when you get it set up. just because it's so beefy. It takes literally like 20% from Terrapagos and then one shots it in return. It's just an obscene variation on it. Trying to think what other matchups. Kali I went through. Miradon's quite good. Um, Koraidon is also pretty good, just because you turn off the sun and they don't like that. You have Psy Spam, which they also don't really love. Lunala was if the more offensive variants could be a little bit troublesome, but in general, it's pretty good because you turn off Shadow Shield. So that's that's one of the big perks of it. I think that was the main restrictions. But yeah, in general, the main things that I feel like the team would struggle with is that Calyrex Shadow could be a bit volatile, just kind of read based. There was no like safe plays, but you could generally like dozo them in the end, and you couldn't get off your poison shenanigans. And Kali I with Clear Smog and Mungus was a nightmare, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and really unfortunate to run into that in Top Cut, but of course, Utah did get second at World, so I
Twice.
guess it was a little bit of the call, I guess. And you know what, they got rewarded for respecting the Dondozo matchup, so fair play to that, I guess.
Yeah.
But
No, yeah, he played great too. So I have no qualms about that.
yeah, and I have my matchup notes pulled up for how I was supposed to approach this matchup, and I think that the part that really that is so frustrating about this team. You mentioned Dondozo is like a second restricted, and so against most Calyrex Shadow teams, where Lifeform Calyrex Shadow respects Calyrex Shadow, it does so much damage. And the trade off is that they're putting a lot of their eggs in that one basket, and so you take you trade you take a lot of HP, but you trade for the Calyrex Shadow, and then usually in an okay spot. But in this team, it almost feels like the Calyrex Shadow is like a support Pokemon at times, where yeah, you're
Yeah.
totally fine with throwing it away to do 70% to two Pokemon because Dondozo is going to clean up, and so yeah, that's a really really difficult interaction to play against. You can tell me that I'm interpreting how to play the team wrong, but that was my experience with it on ladder. Was that you get to play really aggressively with the Calyrex Shadow, just because you have the Dozo back a lot of the time.
No, that's right, and a lot of times too, like it plays the interesting mind games too because you lead like NDD, or sorry, Calyrex Weezing, and then you can like protect. Like they have to like it's a hard pick for them to what to expect. Is like, do they want to let Weezing get up poison, or do they want Calyrex to do a bunch of damage to their team? And like you can protect in front of Urshifu for once because you actually have Weezing, which actually comes up a lot, just because a lot of times people don't even think about it, especially like Scarf Urshifus that are on like the weaker side. You can just protect Calyrex and then set up poisons and then get in Dozo, and then you're just in a great spot. Because then, yeah, a lot of times too, you can like waste turns if you get to Dozo in the right spot, like when they're like poison damage is racking up. But yeah, that's in general. You can play a little bit more aggressive with Calyrex, and try to get poisons off. As long as you get like a bunch of damage and the poisons off, you usually can kind of end game here with Dozo. Just because lefties and they usually have to bring their own Rillaboom to try and do damage to Dozo, and then you just make it gain 12% every turn, and then it protects, and then back at full. It's just like I watched my first round opponent. I almost felt bad for them just because I saw their face after like I lived the two lances that crit me, and then like two wood hammers, and they were just like shocked. And I lived on like 20 HP. I was like, I figure I was gonna live that. I don't die very often. Just never dies.
Yeah, and I guess on that note, you mentioned you round one, and you mentioned you played a couple Clear Smog and Mungo. So I guess talk me through your tournament run and your tournament experience. And I forget, is this your first time going to the World Championships?
Yeah, this is my first Worlds.
Wow. Okay, and
Uh,
you already got to
I
top
was
16. So
Yeah, I was I was gonna be my goal was day two. I felt good enough to go day two. So I just felt, I was one of those tournaments I was just feeling really ready for, and I felt like I just had a good feeling going into it. So the first round was kind of it's Scarf, Annihilate, and one of the last adjustments we made was to make our Shifu faster than Scarf Annihilate, and I was glad I did for that matchup. It actually came up, to where I was able to chip it enough to where Final Gambit didn't hurt. Uh, Game one, I remember came down to a 50-50 because I had like Calyrex on the field, and they had their get or Annihilate, and I just predicted that they would go close combat, expecting me to Terra, and I just didn't Terra, and I won that 50-50. And then game two, I was able to win the just kind of more cleanly, just kind of set up stuff, poison stuff, get in Dodozo, and just kind of go from there. That's kind of the ideal matchup. Is like you can go Terra Grass. It doesn't like versus Smeargle, because if you do a few order ups, then Glacial Lance just does nothing. So this is the matchup you definitely can go Terra Grass Dozo, and it really shines. and you don't care about decorate because you're unaware. So it's really kind of neuters that whole set from Smeargle or that kind of teams. So it was a pretty good matchup. I was really surprised they didn't go Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt does do a lot of damage to um, Dozo. That's was one of the more problem Pokemon, but you could like play around it. Like Draco Meteor does like 50-ish%, but you can two round it. You kind of have to save your Terra for it, otherwise they can like double tap you with like Meteor and Thunderclap or something like that. But yeah, the first set went pretty well for them.
Yeah, and they didn't even have Meteor in this case. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess. So and you know you played. It looks like you played 12 rounds of Pokemon this weekend. What were
Yes.
some of the? So talk me through some of the highlight matchups that you played through in day one.
Yeah, so round two was kind of this classic exam. Game one, I had like the worst RNG in my life. I let them paralyze my Dodozo, and I literally was paralyzed for 4 straight turns. Like I could not move. And so they would just slowly chipped it down. And it took them literally 4 turns of me not being able to do anything, of their Shifu and Zamazenta like going into me for they to KO Dodozo. And then after I didn't get paralyzed infinitely, I was able to pull that game out. No Clear Smog Amoonguss, which was good. The third round was they had Clear Smog Amoonguss Cali I. I was actually really impressed by them. So it was kind of a cool story for me. Is that they were a player that had reached out to me, saying that they had wanted my advice, and I talked to them a little about my prep for tournaments, and I kind of forgot about it. And then they came out so they really valued that, and that they had learned a lot, and that they were really happy to be at Worlds. So it was really kind of cool to be able to play someone that I had impacted in a way. And then they just destroyed me. Like this matchup is terrible. I had no way to deal with Amoonguss, Clear Smog, and Smeargle with like Blood Moon. That's like the nightmare matchup. And they played it perfectly. They managed their trick room turns really well. I didn't have a chance in this one. So I got 2-0'd pretty quickly, and I was just like, okay, as long as I just don't play any more Clear Smog Amoonguss, I am good. But it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of cool to be able to play someone that I had talked to a little bit in the past. The next 2 sets I played Miradon, or round 4 I played Miradon. It's the Screens matchup I talked to. I think they were one of the Hong Kong qualifiers that they won the Hong Kong tournaments. Just Poison just withered them down. It was pretty cool. Round 5 I actually got quite lucky. So I they needed to hit, I think, 1 out of 2 meteors to win, and they missed both. To game 2, I may have been able to pull it out, but not as likely. So yeah, I got pretty lucky that one. They played pretty well. So that was the one set that was kind of like, yeah, they played really well, but sometimes you just need some breaks. All these big runs, you eventually need some breaks, and I got a break there. Um, yeah, they played really well. And then yeah, it was funny because I played Avery just because they're one of my locals, so I play them a bunch at locals. So it was kind of funny to have to play them against Worlds. Um, yeah, and that was kind of the more classic Poison. It's very troublesome for them to deal with. I think I got a crit game 1 that helped, but game 2 was pretty. I just let in DD Calyrex as a switch up, and they had trouble with that lead. Um, yeah, so I think in the next one was the one where I qualified for day 2. Yeah, that was with Dorian, who's a friend. Just this team, this is like one of the best matchups you could ever imagine for this team. Just because they don't have a real answer to poison. They are not Terra Water or Shifu, so they can't KO my Calyrex. And then you turn off Lunala, you just poison things at the end, and it's really hard to deal with. So one of the best matchups there. Um, and this one was round 8 was literally just 50-50s turn 1. It was both of us going all in turn 1, and they were Terra normal too, so it's kind of a mirror in a way. But they'd never Terra normaled, and like game 2 I respected it. Game 2 I didn't respect it. Game 3 I kind of thought that they were going to, and I Astro Barrage or I Expanding Force the first turn, and got them down to like 60%, and then I called that they were going to swap in Rillaboom to reset terrain and Terra Normal. So I still Helping Hand Expanding Force into that slot, which KO'd it, regardless whether they slipped or not. So that was a cool play. But once I got the turn 1 right, that was basically what the set was. It was a mess. It would have been a really fun stream set because it was really volatile. And a good player too. But yeah, with that, I ended up 7-1 day 1, which I was super excited about. Michael Kelsch, day 2, I was really excited to play against him. Super, super good player. I've always really respected him as a player and his teams. This is a pretty good matchup, especially Flutter that is not Thunderwave, because Thunderwave is pretty annoying. Game one, I think I missed everything. I think we had like a DC issue, and I led initially Weezing and Dozo, which was like whenever I play this team, they always lead into Flutter, which was a really good lead into that. And then we DC'd, and then we did different leads, but I kept the same lead, and he switched up and had a good adjustment on me. He got me with the substitute, and then I think I missed like Meteor and Muddy Water at end game that kind of hurt me. Um, and then game two, I just ended up going Dozo mode. That was very solid. And in game three, I got them with the adjustment, bringing in Didi instead of Dozo, which won it. Yeah, that was a big confidence booster. It's like, okay, I beat the person who came in second, so I'm doing something right. So I just got to keep falling out. At that point, I was 8-1. I just needed one more win to secure top cut. Sebas, very very strong player. I've been familiar with him through NPA. Um, this was on the side stream. They were specs, which is a little bit more annoying. But Dozo was super good here. We determined that Calyrex was actually really bad here, so because they had double normal and wide guard, double normal, and like I have no way of doing anything meaningful. Um, with Calyrex. So we just went like Weezing, or Shifu, and then Dozo was my restricted. Game two, I think they forgot that Weezing turned off Terrapagos's shell, because I just KO'd his Terrapagos with close combat on her Shifu. And they just, I'm guessing that they forgot that turned off that ability. But yeah, I just KO'd it. And game three, I got crit game one. That's kind of the bad thing with Dozo when you're being passive is that you give him people enough turns, eventually they'll crit. So I mean, I was expecting to happen some, but it did cost me game one. But it balances out. You know, if you get crit every game, you're not going to win anyway. So you just gotta keep out. So balance out the last two games, was able to close it out. It came down to a really close 50-50. Yeah. And then Utah, I wish this set was on stream because this is probably my first set with Utah was probably the most intense set of my life. Like it was absolutely nuts. Um, Basically he led Iron Valiant and Calyrex, and I was caught off guard that it was Speed Iron Valiant. I don't know why I was thinking Speed makes a lot of sense here, but I was thinking that like it'd be attack and just do a lot of damage with Spirit Break. But when I saw it was I led like Urshifu, Calyrex, with Dozo back. When I saw it was Speed Boost, was like, well, I'm losing game one, and I lost game one because of that. Um, and then game two, basically what I had to do was like aggressively call out him guessing that I was going to protect. Like um, the first turn of Trick Room, Calyrex or Shifu was on the field. Calyrex Weezing was on the field. I predicted him going into the Weezing slot and like lancing. So I pollen puffed his Calyrex, which had Terra Grassed, and KO'd it because he had over predicted the slot. And then game three was just like it was a reads after reads of nonstop like up and downs. I think at one point I had accidentally protected in front of his Valiant, and my Dozo had gotten encored into protect, and he was able to set it up to where he had spored my Tatsugiri when it came out of Dozo, but I was still able to get the last like 50-50 right and win. But it was mostly just trying to like stall Trick Room, and I really couldn't go Dozo, so I was like keeping Dozo and just like not tearing and not bringing in Tatsugiri, so it's just kind of sitting there on the field until like the last moment, and then I would go Dozo Tatsugiri. So it's just a lot of kind of mind games. Very, very, very. This is like the worst matchup, mainly because of like the clear smog and the fast Valiant is just very, very troublesome. I was lucky to beat it once, and then I got it again. When I saw my bracket, it's like I'm gonna face Yutza, and I'm probably gonna lose just because the tricks that I had used to beat him the first time, which was like get him when he was not expecting me to protect and stuff like that, wasn't gonna work again. And if he played optimally, it was really hard for me to win, just because I had to get like Calyrex out when Trick Room had ended and they had Chip on, which is really hard because he could just keep pollen puffing up his Calyrex. I had won on time game two. Like I took game one. I forget how I lost, but I just lost game one pretty cleanly of my second set. Game two, I timered him. I took a KO turn one, and then I just stalled the rest of the time because I was like, this is my only win con. And then he didn't let me do that game three, and it was a mess. So it was a very, very close set. Our first set would have been an amazing stream set. Really, really nice guy, really amazing player. I was really excited to see him get second. But this was like the one matchup when we were looking at like day two teams that I did not want to face, and I get it twice, which sucks. But that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, and that's I guess I can get you comment on that because obviously you had such an incredible run and going essentially X2 over the course of the entire tournament. And your only losses were to Clear Swagamungus, which is really crazy.
Yeah.
And it just shows how strong this team is into the field. But yeah, I think that to me it's like, oh wow, like this really shows how I really don't like the big top cuts that we're getting from now on, because it shows how how much variance there is. Where you had a really good record, and if we had the more traditional system where you played 14, 15 rounds, you probably are in top 8. And for all you know, maybe you face Utah then, maybe you face someone else then. But that one loss isn't going to sink you. So I don't know. What do you think about the new structure, having played a tournament with the sort of new day two splits?
It was interesting. I did like playing less turns was nice. The longer top cut, I guess, there was a bit of a break. Like I had like an hour break between when I did my last match with Utah and then when I played again. So the buy is nice just to kind of get a break, but you also kind of get like out of the moment for a little bit. I think so that was a little interesting. But I generally liked it, but it's kind of tricky because playing like 15 rounds of Swiss and then trying to play top cut is brutal. So it's like trying to play less rounds and get to that, I guess, makes sense. But it also makes it really hard to like get that because X2 over like 11 rounds is really hard to do. Like you have to hit your good matchups, you have to play amazing the entire day. You don't really have like any room for error. So it's a little bit less forgiving, but a little bit less brutal to play.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I was a little like because I was like, if I feel like if I saw Yuta's path because like he played Pago's Balance the next, then he played Michael, who I'd already played, and had a good matchup too. So I feel like if I had got past Yuta, I had a pretty clear like I felt good about all the matchups on that bracket. It's just I got Yuta, which is unfortunate, but that's part of the game.
yeah. Really rooting for really rooting against him, I guess, in the top 32 set.
Yeah,
uh,
I was sitting there just the entire time. If he wins, I'm gonna lose. I don't know how, but if I'm gonna be able to trick him again, he's too good.
mhm. And yeah, that's just kind of how top cuts go, right? Is you kind of have to get a little bit of bracket luck to go your way. But I mean, over the course of the what 12, 13 rounds that you played, just so
Yeah.
consistent, and it was really incredible to see. And I think it really showcases how strong this team is, and especially as Regulation G rotates back in January, I expect to see a lot more of this team.
Yeah, I still think it's really strong. Like there's not the only things that like Cali S is a little volatile, and then Clear Smog Mucus. Like if this team popped up and Clear Smog and Mucus becomes really common, that's one thing. But at least like right now, there's like two people entire top cut, so just don't play those people. But I think if this team became popular, Clear Smog and Mucus is like the clear answer to it, and it would have to make some adjustments to get around it. But it's still playable. It's just hard. And that's you do still beat so much. So I still think it has merit, even if Clear Smog and Mugus really picks up.
Mhm. Yeah. And so definitely recommend that you try this team out. You still got about a week on the Battle Stadium ladder for the format goes away for a few months, and then yeah, definitely going to be, like I said, a strong contender for San Antonio regionals. I believe is our first regional in Regulation G Part 2. So yeah, I definitely think that we're going to see a lot of the team. Definitely recommend you try it out. And of course, we've got the rental code on screen. The paste will be in the description down below, and I know you posted it on your Twitter as well. So make sure to give him a follow. I know you also post all sorts of really informative content for newer players as well. So and also all sorts of hot takes that I often disagree with. So
Yeah, it's true.
but
I have a lot of hot takes. I test a lot of bad stuff, and I eventually get things right. But it takes me a long time to get things right.
yep, yeah, and that's what people who watch my channel know. I'm filled with hot takes as well. So that's really that's really one of the best parts of talking about Pokemon. But yeah, definitely recommend check the team out, and also check out Justin's Twitter and yeah, I guess Justin, did you have any final words or shoutouts that you wanted to give?
Yeah, I want to shout out Allies, which is Pain, and Crawl Shots. They were both like my big testing buddies and really helped optimize the team with EVs testing and a lot of the ideas that fleshed out. So big props to them, as well as Velocity and Colossal Koala, who both helped really kind of help the idea. I had I had hours of chats with them, just me shitting on Dozo, and then I ended up bringing it. Just makes it really funny. So big shout outs to them. Big shout outs to my wife who encouraged me to go to this event. And yeah, because I was really on the fence because there was like so much money, and we just went there for my honeymoon. So I was like, I don't know if I should. It's so much money. And she really encouraged me to go. So I don't know if I would have gone without her. So big shout out to her as well.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, congratulations once again. Man, you've had such an incredible last couple seasons. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how you continue and what heights you're going to reach over the next few years. So yeah, congrats again on top 16 worlds. And yeah, until next time, I will see you all later.